Imagine this: the bright lights of a Hollywood stage, a lone cowboy in a wide-brimmed hat, eyes sharp as steel, gripping his revolver in a tense showdown under a blazing noon sun. The music swells. The crowd holds its breath and, bang! The villain falls and our hero strides off into the sunset. Thrilling, right? Now let's wipe that image clean. The real Wild West of the 1870s was nothing like the movies. It was a place where stepping foot meant your odds of survival dropped dramatically. Think you're tough enough to handle it? Trust me. There's a reason they called it wild. Welcome to today's journey. We're traveling back in time to explore the harsh realities of life in the Wild West. This is a legendary chapter in history, but it's also a world where every day was a fight to stay alive. Before we dive in, set the mood. Dim the lights, turn on a gentle fan, and picture yourself by a campfire. The cool prairie wind brushing past. If you're enjoying this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to catch more gripping historical tales. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Whether you're in Vietnam, the US, or anywhere else, we're building a community of history lovers together. Ready? Brace yourself, because we're about to uncover why surviving a single day in the Wild West was nearly impossible. Picture waking up in 1875, somewhere on the vast plains of Wyoming or Montana. The first thing to greet you isn't a warm sunrise or birdsong. No, it's the smell. A thick, pungent mix that makes you want to hold your breath. It's the odor of unwashed bodies, weeks without a bath, the stench of horse manure from the nearby stable. And if you're near a town, the reek of raw sewage pooling somewhere close. Forget the fresh air of romanticized landscapes. Out here, nature has a scent, and it's far from pleasant. Now let's talk personal hygiene. A bath? That's a luxury. Water is a precious resource saved for drinking, cooking, or watering a few struggling crops. A hot bath? Dream on. You might go an entire winter without one. At best, you wipe yourself down with a damp rag, and if you're lucky, you can plunge into an icy river in summer. But even that's rare. The result? Your body becomes a playground for lice, fleas, and all sorts of unwelcome critters. Just thinking about it makes your skin crawl, doesn't it? Then there's your bed. If you can call it that. It's likely a thin straw mattress, crawling with bedbugs laid on a cold dirt floor. Last night, you shivered under a thin blanket, fighting the bone-chilling cold of the plains. This morning, your body aches like you've been through a brawl. No memory foam or ergonomic pillows here. Sleep in the Wild West is about survival, not rest. And so, your day begins. No morning coffee, no newspaper, no scrolling through your phone. What awaits is a grueling day of physical labor. From sunrise to sunset. No weekends, no vacations, no work-life balance. Your body is your only tool, and you'll push it to the breaking point. Imagine plowing fields under a scorching sun for 14 hours, hauling water from a stream a mile away, chopping wood until your hands blister and bleed, or working in dusty gold mines where the air chokes you. Even the strongest, burly men or tough women were worn down fast. By age 30, many were stooped, arthritic, or permanently injured from overwork. And that's just the morning. Have you ever worked a 12-hour day of hard labor with no breaks, no machines, just your own strength? If you're a city dweller, the last time you sweated might have been a 30-minute gym session. But here there's no pause button. No clock to tell you it's time to rest. Just work and more work and more work. Let's pause for a moment. How does this make you feel? Grateful for your modern life, maybe? I bet you are. But we're only getting started. The Wild West is far harsher than this. In the moments ahead, we'll dive into deadlier dangers. From brutal weather and disease to threats from both man and nature. Think you'd make it to day 2? Share your thoughts in the comments. And hit like if you want to hear the rest of this story. You've survived your first morning in the Wild West of 1875. Your body aches. The stench clings to every breath. And you're just beginning to grasp the cost of existing here. If you think the day will get easier, think again. You're dreaming in broad daylight. The Wild West doesn't give you a moment to catch your breath. We're about to continue this journey, plunging deeper into the perils of the environment and community. Dangers that might make you wish you'd never set foot in this land. Are you ready? We're stepping into a world where every move is a gamble with fate. Picture yourself stepping out of your home, If you can call a rickety wooden cabin or a sod hut a home. On a winter morning in the Wild West, the cold is bone-chilling, with temperatures inside your cabin easily dropping to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, or about -29 Celsius, unless you kept the fireplace burning all night. But burning a fire non-stop? Forget it. Firewood is a precious resource, and no one wastes it just to stay warm. There's no central heating. No cozy down blankets, no Gore-Tex jackets. You huddle under a thin blanket, your breath visible in the air. Come summer, the story flips. Scorching heat leaves you drenched in sweat. With no air conditioning or electric fan to offer relief. Homes here are makeshift sod walls, wooden roofs, or worse, just canvas flaps. When heavy rain hits, the roof leaks like a sieve, water dripping onto the dirt floor. Want to escape the harsh weather? Good luck, because nature in the Wild West shows no mercy. Now let's talk about clothing. Don't dream of those sleek cowboy outfits from the movies. Men typically had 1 or 2 sets of rough canvas or denim clothes, scratchy and uncomfortable, worn repeatedly until they fell apart. Women had it worse, bound in layers regardless of the weather. Corsets cinched tight enough to steal your breath, petticoats and long skirts dragging through the dust. These clothes were heavy, restrictive and rarely washed. Sweat, dirt and body odor became your constant companions. Those glamorous Hollywood costumes? Pure fiction. Feeling hungry? Don't expect a protein-packed breakfast or a fruit smoothie. A typical Wild West breakfast might be a bowl of stewed beans, rock-hard biscuits, and a cup of bitter boiled coffee. Fresh vegetables or fruit. A rare luxury, available only in season if you lived near a garden. Meat was salted or smoked, since refrigerators were a distant future invention. The result? A monotonous diet lacking vitamins, making scurvy, a disease from vitamin C deficiency, a haunting threat. Bleeding gums, loose teeth, and a weakened body could strike just because you couldn't get an orange. That life-saving morning coffee? Far from a Starbucks latte. Wild West coffee was boiled to a bitter sludge, sometimes mixed with crushed eggshells or a pinch of salt to cut the edge. You drank it not for taste, but for the caffeine to face the grueling day ahead. Before heading out, what do? Check your boots. Not for style, but to ensure no scorpions or rattlesnakes crawled inside overnight. A bite from these guests could mean a painful death, especially with the nearest doctor a day's ride away. Shaking out your boots each morning was a survival habit, learned from the tragic lessons of those who came before. Now you step outside, hoping the world beyond your door is kinder. Wrong. The Wild West landscapes are breathtaking, endless prairies, towering mountains, but they don't welcome you. The weather is unpredictable, with no forecast to warn you. A sunny day can turn into a blizzard in hours, burying you under snow. Tornadoes, flash floods, or prolonged droughts could kill you without warning. No technology, no safe shelters, just you praying nature's in a good mood. Think fleeing to a town is safer? Think again. Wild West towns weren't havens. They sprang up haphazardly with no planning. Dirt roads turned to muddy quagmires in rain or choked you with dust when dry. Sanitation? Practically non-existent. Horse manure, garbage and raw sewage littered the streets, attracting flies and disease. Germ theory wasn't understood, so outbreaks of cholera, typhoid, smallpox, diphtheria, or tuberculosis could wipe out half a town in days. A slight cough today might signal death by tomorrow. Living in a town didn't mean safety. It just traded one danger for another. Maybe you duck into a saloon, hoping for a moment's relief. Forget the glamorous bars of Hollywood. Saloons were often dusty, bare rooms with rough wooden tables. The whiskey, not fine-aged bourbon. It was homemade rock gut, spiked with vile additives, chewed tobacco juice, cayenne pepper, pine resin, even gunpowder. One shot could blind you or knock you out cold. You drank not to savor, but to dull the harsh reality. We're only halfway through, and already the Wild West proves it's not for the faint of heart. How long do you think you'd last? A day? A week? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining this journey. If you think you've seen the worst, think again. Now we're diving into a darker side of the Wild West. Violence and a devastating lack of medical care. This is where every moment could be your last. Picture yourself stepping out of a saloon, the pale moonlight casting shadows on the dusty dirt road. The air is thick with the scent of whiskey and tobacco. Suddenly, a shout pierces the night. Two men, faces flushed from drink, argue over a card game. In a flash, harsh words turn to gunfire. One man crumples, blood pooling in the dirt. This isn't the honorable duel of Hollywood films, with two gunslingers facing off at high noon. No, violence in the Wild West is chaotic, impulsive, and far from glamorous. Most shootings stem from petty disputes, drunken brawls, land squabbles, or a misplaced glance. In a society where nearly everyone carries a weapon, the smallest disagreement can end in death. Speaking of weapons, guns in the Wild West aren't mere accessories. Almost everyone, farmers, miners, cowboys, carries a revolver or knife. These aren't for show, they're tools for survival. You need a gun to hunt, protect livestock from bears, wolves, or cougars, and sometimes to defend yourself from human threats. Guns even serve as long-distance signals, like calling for help. But don't mistake this for a gun enthusiast's paradise. Many towns like Dodge City or Tombstone enforce strict laws. Visitors must surrender their firearms at the sheriff's office. Those dramatic street duels? Mostly Hollywood myth. In reality, shootings are often ambushes or chaotic robberies. No honor. No rules, just blood and dust. Now imagine you're shot, or worse, nicked by a razor while shaving. Who do you turn to? The answer: almost no one. Medicine in the Wild West is a nightmare. Doctors here are rarely trained. They might be former miners turned self-proclaimed healers or wandering quacks peddling fake remedies. Surgery? Forget modern anesthesia. If you're lucky, you get a swig of whiskey or a dose of morphine before the doctor saws off your limb with a rusty blade. Sterilization? Non-existent. Surgical tools are seldom cleaned, making infection almost certain. A small cut can turn into gangrene, leading to amputation or a gruesome death. Many don't die from the initial wound but from the infection that follows. Treating illness? Don't hope for antibiotics or sterile hospitals. Common cures include bloodletting, draining your blood to balance your body, or dosing you with toxic concoctions like mercury or arsenic. These often make you sicker, if not kill you faster than the disease. Toothache. Welcome to Wild West dentistry. A pair of pliers, no anesthesia, just your grit. Many live with chronic pain from rotten teeth or poorly healed bones, simply because there's no alternative. Childbirth is another horror. In remote areas, 1 in 4 births ends in the death of the mother or child. Even in larger towns, maternal mortality is 100 times higher than today. No prenatal care, no obstetricians, and the slightest complication can spell disaster. Many men in the Wild West raise children alone after losing their wives in childbirth. A heartbreaking but common reality. Break a bone? Pray for luck. Fractures are often set improperly, leading to lifelong pain or disability. Survival here hinges more on chance than medicine. A fever, an open wound, or a difficult birth can easily send you to the grave. Ever thought how lucky you are to live in an era with hospitals and medicine just a phone call away? In the Wild West, there's number 911. No ambulances, just you in the harsh hand of fate. Now, imagine standing on the vast prairies of the Wild West in 1875. The sun blazing overhead, dust coating your face. You've survived a day of relentless dangers, sudden violence, abysmal healthcare, and threats from both nature and man. But today we're leaving your rickety sod hut to explore another facet of life here: travel. Don't envision romantic horseback rides or smooth stagecoach journeys like in the movies. In the Wild West, every trip is a gamble with death. And the greatest journey of all, the Oregon Trail, is known as the nation's longest graveyard. Get ready, because we're entering a world where every mile could be your last. Travel in the Wild West isn't like hopping in a car or booking a flight. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, is a marvel of its time, but it's only for those with deep pockets. For most frontier folk, farmers, miners, or adventurers, cash is scarce. Your options: walk, ride a horse, or take a stagecoach. Each comes with a steep cost, not just in money but in body and spirit. Let's start with horses, the romantic symbol of the West. But the reality is far less glamorous. A good horse can cost months of wages, and saddles are rough, leaving you blistered after hours of riding. Horses spook easily, a strange noise, a rattlesnake, or a gust of wind. And if you're thrown, injuries are almost guaranteed. Broken bones, dislocated joints, or even death are common, especially when help is miles away. If your horse gets hurt, don't expect a vet. The usual cure is a bullet, ending the suffering for both horse and rider. What about stagecoaches? Forget the glamorous carriages of Hollywood. Wild West stagecoaches were rattling, suspension-free contraptions that made you feel every rock and rut in the road. Motion sickness, or rather stagecoach sickness, was a daily reality. The roads were abysmal. Dry, they churned up choking dust that stung your eyes and clogged your lungs. Wet, they turned to sticky mud, bogging down coaches or snapping wheels. Even a short trip to the nearest town, a few miles away, could become a perilous adventure. But nothing compares to the greatest journey of all, the Oregon Trail. This 2,000-mile route from Missouri to Oregon drew some 400,000 souls chasing the promise of a new life. The cost, however, was staggering. 1 in 10 never reached their destination. Dubbed the nation's longest graveyard, the Oregon Trail earned its name. Estimates suggest 10 to 15 people died per mile, with makeshift crosses and nameless graves dotting the path, roughly one grave every 100 meters. These weren't deaths from dramatic gunfights or Native American attacks, as Hollywood would have you believe. No, the real killers were disease, accidents, and nature's unrelenting cruelty. Disease was the deadliest foe. Cholera, spread through tainted water, could strike you healthy at breakfast and leave you dead by supper, with no effective cure. Entire wagon trains could lose dozens in days. Dysentery, typhoid, and mountain fever also lurked, especially targeting children, the most vulnerable. Each stop often meant digging a new grave, frequently for a child who'd never see the promised land. Crossing rivers was another lethal challenge. Rivers like the Platte, Columbia, or Snake were far from gentle. Wagons didn't float, so pioneers hauled them across like makeshift rafts. But capsizing was common, and when it happened, people, livestock, and supplies were swept away. Hundreds drowned, losing everything in a failed crossing. Even surviving the loss of food or gear could doom a family to despair. Violence on the Oregon Trail? Contrary to myth, attacks by Native Americans were rare. Many tribes actually aided settlers, offering food or guidance. Accidents, however, were far more common. Wagon wheels crushing feet, livestock kicking skulls, or misfired guns from inexperienced handlers claimed more lives than any battle. Every day on the trail tested survival. Yet the greatest toll was often mental. Imagine burying a loved one, your child, parent, or spouse, by the roadside. No time to mourn, no proper ceremony. You had to keep moving with winter closing in, knowing delay could mean death. Grief, stress, and isolation gnawed at the mind. Women especially suffered from prairie madness, a crushing depression, anxiety, or even psychosis born of relentless work, loneliness, and hardship. Some abandoned homes, dreams, or even their lives. Suicide wasn't uncommon, and tales of mothers leaving their children in despair still haunt us. If you reached your destination, Oregon, California, or some new frontier, you often arrived destitute, malnourished, and frail. The promised land, it turned out, held its own challenges. Barren soil, brutal winters, and a fresh fight for survival. The journey changed you forever, but not in the romantic way stories claim. Imagine now, you've endured a grueling day on the Oregon Trail, your body exhausted from a dusty, dangerous trek. You've faced raging rivers, lurking diseases, and accidents that could kill in an instant. But as the sun sets, the Wild West of 1875 takes on a new face, a world of darkness, danger, and unrelenting unease. Here, night isn't just the absence of light. It's another test of survival, where bandits, harsh nature, and eerie sounds set your heart racing. Brace yourself, for we're about to enter a darker chapter of the Wild West. As you pause to rest after a long day, the sunset bathing the prairies in a warm glow, you might hope for a moment's peace. But don't relax just yet. The Wild West never sleeps, and outlaws, outlaws, are always watching. Stagecoach robberies are a real and constant threat, frequent enough to keep any traveler on edge. These bandits aren't the dashing rogues of cinema. They're desperate men willing to kill for a sack of flour or a few silver coins. You might be jostling along in a creaking stagecoach, enduring every bump when suddenly the thunder of hooves echoes, and masked figures emerge from the brush. In a heartbeat you could lose everything: goods, money, even your life. Every journey is a gamble, and banditry is just one of the risks. Nature, as always, was not on your side. The Wild West was a place where the weather itself could turn into a deadly enemy within hours. A sudden flash flood could sweep away entire wagon trains, drowning people and livestock in a rush of water. In the summer, scorching heat would leave you dehydrated and collapsing in the desert, with not a single tree for shade. In the winter, blizzards could bury you under thick snow, freezing your body within minutes. Think of the Donner Party, trapped by snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains. They were forced to turn to cannibalism to survive. That wasn't folklore. It was the brutal reality of the West. Then there was the issue of navigation.
No GPS.
No detailed maps, just vague directions from travelers who came before you, or natural markers like the big oak tree or the red rock hill. Getting lost could be a death sentence. You could wander in circles for days, running out of water and food, while the vast prairie seemed to swallow up every last shred of hope. One small mistake in reading the land could doom an entire wagon train. When night fell, everything became more frightening. There was no electricity in the Wild West. Your only light came from candles or oil lamps, soft flickers that left thick shadows all around you. One stray spark from a lamp could ignite a grass hut or wooden cabin in seconds. Many towns burned to the ground at least once due to such accidents. And when that happened, you lost everything: your home, your belongings, and sometimes your life. If you stayed in town, the hotel or boarding house was your only option. But don't expect comfort. The beds were straw mattresses full of bedbugs, with sour-smelling sheets that were rarely washed. Privacy? Almost non-existent. To save money, you might have to share your bed with a stranger, someone who snored, smelled awful, or worse, carried disease. A night at the inn could cost several hours' wages. So many people opted to sleep in stables, barns, or even under the open sky, risking cold winds and wild animals. Camping outdoors wasn't any easier. You had to build a fire from dry sticks, cooking whatever you had, maybe a handful of beans or some salted meat. But cooking was tricky. Meals were often burnt on the outside and raw inside. Worse, your fire might go out in the night, leaving you shivering in the bitter cold. You'd sleep on hard ground without modern tents or sleeping bags, exposed to the elements and to wildlife. Wolves, bears, or mountain lions might circle your camp, drawn by the smell of food. Rattlesnakes and scorpions loved warm places, like your bedroll. One bite in the dark, without a doctor nearby, could mean the end. Night in the Wild West was a symphony of unease. The howls of wolves, strange cries of night birds, and the heavy darkness kept you from ever fully relaxing. Every little sound, a snapping twig, a gust of wind, jolted you awake, your hand clutching a pistol. Attacks, whether from predators or people, often came at dawn, when you were most exhausted. Sleep was never peaceful. The constant stress wore down the mind. Many pioneers wrote in their journals about deep fatigue, lingering fear, and a sense of helplessness as night closed in. Some couldn't take it, slipping into panic or deep depression, something settlers called prairie madness. In the dark, the West didn't just test your body, it tested your soul. Now imagine yourself by the campfire. Its flickering glow lights your face as the vast darkness of 1875's Wild West surrounds you. You've survived brutal days, dangerous journeys, the threat of bandits, sleepless nights filled with the cries of wolves. But the West wasn't just about lone cowboys or wagon trains crossing the plains. It was a world of many peoples, coexisting, clashing, and sometimes being crushed by ruthless injustice. Tonight, we'll explore a lesser-known side of the Wild West. Its rich but conflicted diversity, where the dream of freedom often came with a heavy price. So get comfortable. This story is not only dramatic, but it just might leave you with a deep sense of loss and the lingering ache of unfairness. When you think of the Wild West, you might picture a white cowboy with a wide-brimmed hat and a revolver, thanks to Hollywood. But in reality, the West was a far more diverse landscape, where cultures, peoples, and stories collided. Chinese immigrants, Mexican families, black cowboys, Europeans from Germany, Ireland, Italy, or Scandinavia, and dozens of native nations all helped shape this rugged frontier. Yet diversity didn't mean equality. The West was a boiling pot of racial conflict, injustice, and violence, where the dream of a better life was often crushed by prejudice and cruelty. Let's begin with the Chinese immigrants. They came to the West hoping for opportunity and worked the most dangerous jobs, building the Transcontinental Railroad, mining for gold under brutal conditions, or running small shops in isolated towns. In return, they faced harsh discrimination. Their wages were lower than white workers, even when the work could cost them their lives. In mining camps, they were often driven out by violence, beaten, or targeted with unfair taxes meant just for them. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, the first major U.S. immigration law to restrict a group based on nationality. Chinese communities were attacked, homes burned, dreams shattered. Imagine working 16 hours a day, hauling rock under the scorching sun, only to be told you don't belong. Mexican Americans, whose families had lived in the Southwest long before it became U.S. territory after the Mexican-American War, were not spared either. Their ancestral lands were stolen through legal loopholes or outright fraud. Their traditional water systems, vital for farming in a harsh climate, were dismantled by newcomers, plunging communities into poverty. Families who once formed the heart of thriving settlements now fought to hold on to what little they had left. Every lost acre was a wound to their heritage and history. And what about Black Americans? Many moved west after the Civil War, seeking freedom from slavery's chains. Black cowboys made up as much as 25% of the labor force on ranches, skilled wranglers whose stories have rarely been told. They still faced racism, though it looked different from the South. Economic and social doors were often slammed in their faces. Black homesteaders faced threats and resentment from white neighbors who didn't want to see them succeed. Yet they endured, riding across the plains, working tirelessly to build new lives, even when recognition never came. But no one endured more than Native Americans. For them, westward expansion was a slow apocalypse. Before Europeans arrived, it's estimated that 15 million indigenous people lived across what is now the U.S. By 1900, fewer than 300,000 remained. Diseases like smallpox, brought by settlers, wiped out millions before a single battle began. But illness wasn't the only killer. U.S. policy, backed by brutal ideologies, like General Philip Sheridan's infamous quote, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian," sought to destroy native life. One devastating strategy was the slaughter of the buffalo. From 30 to 60 million buffalo, they were nearly wiped out, with fewer than 1,000 left by the late 1800s. This wasn't accidental. It was calculated. Cut off the food supply, forced tribes onto reservations. Those reservations were a form of cultural erasure. Native peoples were torn from their homelands and relocated to barren lands with few resources. Children were taken from their families and sent to boarding schools designed to kill the Indian, save the man. There, they were forbidden to speak their languages, practice their religions, or keep their traditions. Their hair was cut, their clothes replaced with Western uniforms, and their identities stripped away. The trauma from these experiences didn't end with one generation. It echoes through families to this day. Some tribes fought back. In 1876, the Battle of Little Bighorn saw Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, defeat the U.S. Army in a rare moment of victory. But triumph was fleeting. After that, military campaigns turned even more ruthless. Villages were attacked, women and children killed. Native resistance slowed the tide, but it could not stop the relentless wave of loss. This loss wasn't just of lives. It was of knowledge, traditions, and ways of living. Many native nations had advanced agricultural systems, sustainable land practices, and rich cultures. But their view of land as communal clashed with settlers' belief in private ownership, leading to broken treaties and betrayal. Lands were seized, promises ignored, and entire nations were pushed to the brink. The Wild West was a place of big dreams, but also a place where those dreams were often crushed by injustice. Chinese immigrants, Mexican families, Black cowboys and native peoples, all brought with them hope, strength, and rich cultural traditions. Yet, they faced a world that did not welcome them. So next time you sit beside a crackling fire, listening to the wind whisper across the prairie, take a moment to remember these people, the ones whose stories were left untold, and the price they paid just to survive in a land that offered little mercy. Now imagine yourself standing in the middle of a noisy mining town in the Wild West, sometime around 1875. Dust clouds rise with every step, and the steady clang of hammers striking stone echoes through the air. You've made it through the long, treacherous journey along the Oregon Trail, facing robbers, harsh wilderness, and the deep injustices of a land as diverse as it is divided. But here you are, entering a new world, a world of booming mining towns, where the promise of gold and quick riches has drawn thousands to chase a dream of transformation. Yet, as with most things in the West, the reality is far from the shining stories. This is a place where sweat, blood, and even lives are the price of simply touching a speck of gold. Get ready, because we're about to step into a dangerous chapter of history, where every day on the job might be your last. The Wild West has always been wrapped in tales of gold rushes, where a poor man might become a millionaire overnight. Mining towns like Virginia City, Deadwood, and Tombstone sprang up like mushrooms after rain, drawing adventurers from all corners of the world. Rumors of glittering streams of gold and rich silver veins spread like wildfire, luring thousands willing to leave everything behind for a shot at fortune. But once you set foot in a mining town, you quickly learn the harsh truth. The dream of wealth belongs to the lucky few. For most, there's only sweat, pain, and bitter disappointment. Now imagine yourself as a miner, standing beside a freezing creek, your back bent low, hands gripping a gold pan. This is placer mining. It sounds simple enough. Scoop some gravel from the stream, swirl it in water, and hope for a few sparkling flakes of gold. But the reality is far from easy. You crouch for hours in icy water, your fingers cracked and bleeding from sharp stones. Your back aches so badly that each step feels like punishment. And after a long, grueling day, if you're lucky, you might find a few tiny flakes worth just a handful of coins. Not even enough for a warm meal. Your body is drained, and the dream of riches begins to feel like a cruel joke. And yet, placer mining is the easy part. Compared to hard rock mining, it's a walk in the park. In hard rock mining, you dig deep into the mountains, into narrow, unstable tunnels propped up with nothing more than wooden beams. There are no modern tools, no machines, just raw manpower and simple tools. Cave-ins are a constant fear. One small crack in the rock could be the last sound you ever hear before tons of stone come crashing down. Stories of miners being buried alive weren't rare. Every day you enter the mine, you're gambling with your life. Even if you make it through the tunnels, the dangers don't end there. The air underground is thick, often poisoned with gases like carbon monoxide. An invisible killer with no smell, no color, that can take you down before you know what's happening. Explosives, black powder, and dynamite were commonly used to blast through rock, but they were deadly tools. One small mistake could cost you a finger, a hand, your eyesight, or your life. A premature blast, a flying rock shard, a miscalculation, everything could go wrong in an instant. And the deafening noise, the constant rumble, it wrecked your hearing over time, leaving you with a ringing in your ears that never ever went away. The long-term health of a miner is another tragic tale. Day after day, breathing in stone dust leads to silicosis, a slow, suffocating death where your lungs harden and your breath becomes shallower until it disappears altogether. Mercury, used to separate gold from sediment, seeps into your body, damaging your nerves, making your hands shake and your memories fade. If you work in copper or lead mines, heavy metal poisoning is inevitable. These illnesses don't kill you outright. They chip away at you slowly, turning every day of survival into a day of pain. And what about working conditions? Forget about safety regulations or benefits. Mine owners cared only about profit, not your life. Injuries were considered normal. A broken arm or a crushed foot, you'd be taken to a so-called doctor, with no real training, who might amputate your leg without anesthesia, or worse, leave you to heal on your own. If you couldn't work anymore, there was no disability aid, no financial help. You'd lose your job, your means of survival, and often your will to hope. And wages? A miner earned about $2 or $3 for 10 to 12 hours of backbreaking work. while saloon keepers, shop owners, even prostitutes, could earn many times more without ever shedding a drop of blood. Mining towns were rough, lawless places. Most of the population was young men, working in dangerous jobs far from their families. Whiskey flowed like water in saloons that stayed open all night, serving homemade liquor strong enough to blind you. Fistfights, knife attacks, and sudden gunfire were part of daily life. Sanitation was a nightmare. Waste, garbage, and sewage piled up, turning towns into breeding grounds for disease. Typhoid, cholera, and other infectious diseases spread quickly, sometimes wiping out dozens in just a few days. And let's say you actually struck gold. How would you turn it into money? That was yet another challenge. Many mining towns didn't have banks, or if they did, they were primitive, unstable, and sometimes outright scams. You'd have to carry your gold with you, making you a perfect target for bandits. Saloons and stores often bought gold at insultingly low prices, preying on miners' desperation. Paper money was unstable, its value constantly shifting, and counterfeits were everywhere. Even if you found gold, keeping it was a whole different battle. Now imagine this. You're lying on a thin blanket inside a canvas tent, in a noisy mining town, with the sound of drunken laughter and distant gunshots echoing through the night. You clutch a tiny pouch of gold close to your chest, knowing that with each passing day, your body is breaking down, and the dream of wealth drifts further away. The mining town promised fortune, but for most it delivered only pain. A place where sweat, blood, and even life itself were traded for a few golden flakes that would never be enough to change your fate. The Wild West once again showed no mercy for the faint of heart. Now picture yourself standing on an open plain in the Wild West, sometime around 1875. The wind whistles through dry grasses, and far in the distance, you hear the lowing of cattle. You've survived the treacherous mining towns, where the dream of gold often ended in heartbreak. Now you're trying something new, raising cattle or farming. On the surface it seems more stable, more peaceful, the promise of a home and a prosperous future. But don't get too comfortable. Out here nothing comes easy. Ranching and farming are paths full of risk, where nature, disease, and the brutal reality of frontier life can crush even the strongest. Get ready, because we're about to enter a new chapter, where every day is a battle to keep your herd alive and turn a patch of dry earth into something like a dream. After months of struggling in the dangerous mining towns, you decide to try your luck at cattle ranching, a job that, at first glance, seems to spare you from the perils of life underground. But the moment you set foot into the world of the open range, you quickly realize it comes with its own brutal challenges. To start, you need a massive investment. Vast stretches of land, hundreds of cattle, horses, and equipment. All of it expensive. Most newcomers to the West don't have that kind of money, so they borrow, hoping the cattle will bring in enough profit to pay off their debts. But debt is a trap. One season of drought or a sudden winter storm can wipe out your entire dream, leaving you buried under loans you'll never repay. Nature, as always, is a ruthless enemy. Drought can turn lush pastures into cracked earth, starving your cattle or forcing you to sell at a loss. Western winters are unforgiving. Think back to the Great Die-Up of 1886 to 87, when temperatures plunged and snow buried the northern plains. Up to 90% of the cattle froze or starved to death, wiping out entire fortunes. One day, you might be the proud owner of a massive herd. The next, you're staring at a field of lifeless, snow-covered carcasses. Disease is another silent killer. Texas fever or anthrax could sweep through your herd in a matter of days. With no vaccines and no real cure, all you can do is watch helplessly as your most valuable assets, your cattle, drop dead. Predators like wolves and cougars prowl the edges of your land, ready to pounce on any weak or young animal. Even the grass could kill. Certain poisonous plants in the open range could take out a cow with a single bite. And accidents? They're a daily threat. A cow trapped in mud, a spooked horse, or a mishap while fixing a fence could cost you dearly. Then come the cattle drives, the iconic symbol of the Wild West. But far from the romantic picture seen in books and movies. Cowboys, usually young, poor hired hands, worked up to 20 hours a day, riding under the blazing sun or freezing rain, guiding thousands of cattle across hundreds of miles to the nearest railheads. River crossings were the most dangerous part. A panicked herd could stampede, trampling one another or dragging cowboys down into the swirling currents. One small mistake could mean death, for both man and beast. The greatest danger in cattle drives was the stampedes, terrifying stampedes. Just a clap of thunder, a flash of lightning, or a small noise could send thousands of cattle into a panic, turning them into an unstoppable destructive force. Cowboys trying to control the herd often ended up trampled to death, their bodies crushed beneath thousands of hooves. Survivors describe the sound of a stampede like a storm raging around you, making your heart pound wildly with fear. Life as a cowboy was far from the Hollywood legend. Their monthly pay was only about $30, a meager sum for such a dangerous and grueling job. Many cowboys were very young, sometimes only 15 or 16 years old, coming from poor backgrounds. A large number were black, Mexican, or mixed race, often facing discrimination despite having skills as sharp as anyone else. Their diet was pitifully simple: stewed beans, salted pork, and biscuits as hard as rocks, with almost no fresh vegetables or fruit. Medical care was nearly non-existent. A small wound exposed to harsh weather or sudden violence could mean an early death for a young cowboy, shattering their dreams on the open plains. If cattle herding seemed too risky, you might think farming would be steadier. The Homestead Act of 1862 promised 160 acres of free land to anyone willing to farm it for 5 years. Sounds like a dream, right? But in reality it was a nightmare. Western land was often dry and water scarce, and 160 acres wasn't enough to support a family. Traditional farming methods from the East or Europe failed miserably in this harsh land. Settlers lacked knowledge of dry farming, a technique that required deep understanding of soil and climate. You'd till the scorched earth under the blazing sun, sowing seeds with hope, only to watch crops wither from drought or fall victim to insects. Imagine yourself as a farmer, standing in a barren field, sweat streaming down your face, your hands gripping a worn-out hoe. You left everything behind: family, home, safety, chasing the promise of your own piece of land. But every day the land rejects you. The rain doesn't come, or when it does, it turns the fields to mud and washes away your seeds. Livestock die from disease, and the debt you borrowed for seeds, tools, and animals weighs heavier every day. Many settlers gave up, abandoning their sod huts and broken dreams to become wanderers or laborers for large farms. Life raising cattle and farming in the Wild West was a test of endurance and luck. Each day you faced harsh nature, illness, and isolation. Cowboys, despite their romantic image in movies, were hard workers living dangerous, short lives. Farmers, hoping for stability, often found themselves trapped in a cycle of failure and debt. The West, once again, proved it was no place for the faint-hearted. Lying on your straw mattress, hearing the wind howl through the prairie, you wonder, do you have what it takes to carry on? Or will the West swallow your dreams whole, just like it did for so many others? Picture yourself sitting inside a sod hut on the vast plains of the Wild West in 1875. The cold wind whistles through the cracks in the walls, and the faint candlelight flickers across your weary face. You've endured brutal challenges, dangerous cattle drives, harsh winters that claimed your herd, and barren fields that refused to grow. But the story of the West doesn't end here. Today we step into the world of farmers and hired hands, where grueling labor and isolation push people to the edge of endurance. This is not the dream of a free life. It's a daily struggle to survive, where every drop of sweat can feel meaningless against the harshness of nature and society. Prepare yourself, because this chapter will take you into a world of pain, loneliness, and shattered hopes. After struggling for months with cattle ranching, you decide to try your hand at farming, hoping for a more stable life on your own piece of land. The Homestead Act of 1862 promised 160 acres of free land, but when you arrive, you quickly realize this dream comes with a steep price. The western soil is dry and tough, packed with dense, rock-hard grass roots. Breaking the ground means hard, back-breaking labor with just a simple hoe and crude plow. It can take more than a year just to prepare a few acres for planting. Every swing of the hoe sends aches through your body, aching back, blistered and bleeding hands. This grueling work leaves lasting marks: hunched shoulders, arthritis, and pain that never truly fades, even when you're barely 30. Building a home is another challenge. On the treeless plains, You construct sod houses from thick blocks of earth cut straight from the prairie. These homes are dark, damp, and drafty. Heavy rains leak through the roof, turning the dirt floor into a sticky mess. Insects and rattlesnakes find shelter in every crack, turning sleep into a constant battle against unwelcome guests. Even worse, these fragile homes can collapse in fierce storms, leaving you and your family homeless under the vast open sky. Nature keeps testing you. Drought can turn newly sown fields into barren deserts, while heavy rains drown seeds in mud. Early frosts can kill crops just days before harvest. Then there are the locust swarms, nightmarish clouds of millions of insects blotting out the sun, devouring everything in their path. Wheat, corn, even clothes hung out to dry. In a matter of hours, your entire crop can vanish, leaving you hungry and hopeless. Illness is another enemy. If your family falls sick during planting or harvest, your crops may fail and starvation looms. Women, whether pregnant or newly delivered, still toil in the fields, plowing, carrying water, harvesting under the blazing sun. A fever, a small wound, or complications during childbirth could take lives, leaving behind crude graves scattered across the prairie. Farm accidents are always lurking. Homemade tools like plows and hoes often break, causing deep cuts or broken bones. Panicked animals, horses or cattle, can trample you in seconds. Falling into a grain bin can suffocate you. An old barn sometimes collapse, trapping those inside. Every workday is a gamble with fate. Isolation makes everything worse. Your nearest neighbor might be miles away, and women, in particular, endure heavy loneliness. Sometimes they go for months without speaking to anyone besides their husband and children. Prairie madness becomes a real fear. The endless isolation, relentless work, and constant worry push many into depression, anxiety, or even mental breakdowns. Some give up entirely, abandoning their sod houses and shattered dreams, unable to bear the harshness of this life. Economics is another tough challenge. Getting your products to distant markets is a costly and risky battle, traveling over muddy roads or choking dust. Without refrigerators, fresh vegetables and meat spoil quickly, wasting all your hard work. Big agricultural companies and railroad corporations manipulate the market, forcing low prices for your goods while hiking up transportation costs, squeezing your profits dry. Every harvest feels like a gamble, and most of the time you lose. If farming is too harsh, you might try wage labor in a growing town. Jobs in factories, processing plants, or railroad construction promise steadier income, but the price is high. Workplace safety barely exists. Machinery in factories has no guards, ready to cut off fingers or worse if you lose focus for a second. Building structures or bridges comes without safety harnesses. One slip from the scaffolding might be your last. Railroad work is among the deadliest, especially for Chinese laborers tasked with handling explosives to blast through mountains. A premature explosion can claim dozens of lives in an instant. Work hours are brutal. 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, with wages barely enough to get by. Children as young as 8 or 9 are forced into dangerous jobs, suffering injuries even more often than adults. If you get hurt, there's no insurance or support. Layoffs, wage cuts, or unpaid work are common, and if you complain, you risk being blacklisted. Blacklisting, so no one will hire you again. Even worse, many workers live in company towns, where the company owns the houses, stores, and everything you need. Prices at company stores are inflated, and wages are often paid in script, vouchers that only work at those stores. The result? You get trapped in a cycle of debt, working your whole life with no way out. Every day you wake up, work yourself to exhaustion, and go to bed worried about tomorrow. Imagine lying on a hard bed in a sod house or a cramped room in a company town, listening to the wind howl across the prairie or the noisy saloon nearby. Your body aches. Your mind weighs heavy with loneliness and worry. The Wild West, full of promises of freedom and prosperity, turns out to be a place where every day is a battle against nature, society, and yourself. Do you have what it takes to keep going? Or will the West swallow your dream whole, just like it did for so many others? Imagine yourself sitting inside a small sod house in the Wild West of 1875, the faint glow of an oil lamp casting flickering shadows on rough earthen walls. Outside, The wind whistles across the prairie, carrying the chill of the night. You've survived long days of grueling labor, faced harsh nature, dangerous mining towns, and the deep injustices of a land both wild and unforgiving. But today we're about to explore another side of life here. How the people of the West experienced time, found joy in rare moments, and nurtured family amidst endless challenges. This is a world where each day is shaped by sunlight, every moment of leisure is a precious gift, and childhood is a luxury few can afford. Get ready, because we're stepping into a new chapter, one where family life and community moments shine as beacons of light in the darkness of the frontier. In the Wild West, time was something completely different from the modern world. There were no alarm clocks, no precise schedules, and certainly no 8-hour work shifts. Life revolved around daylight and the rhythm of the seasons. You'd wake with the sunrise, usually at dawn, and go to bed when darkness fell. Since oil lamps and candles were far too valuable to waste, work wasn't measured by hours but by the tasks that needed doing. During harvest season or cattle drives, you might toil from the early morning mist well into the night, week after week without a day off. Punctuality? Almost unheard of. Saying in the morning or after supper was enough for most folks. Only when the stagecoach or train arrived, on a set timetable, did a sense of exact time begin to seep in. Yet even then, a storm or a robbery could throw every plan into chaos. After a long, exhausting day, plowing fields, herding cattle, or working in factories, entertainment was a rare luxury. No movie theaters, no radios, and definitely no Netflix. So what did people do to unwind? They gathered around campfires, sharing stories of travels, battles, or mysterious legends. A simple card game like poker or whist was a common pastime, though it sometimes sparked fights or brawls in the saloons. Music was a great comfort, with humble tunes from fiddles, harmonicas, or guitars filling the air during modest dances. These dances weren't grand parties but cherished community moments where folks could forget their weariness and loneliness for a little while. Reading was a rare delight. A book, whether a Bible, a novel, or an old newspaper, was a treasure, shared and passed from house to house within the community. People read every line carefully, even the small advertisements, as if it were their only link to the outside world. Sports were simple but full of life. A baseball game on a dirt field with homemade equipment, an exciting horse race, or a wrestling match between strong farmers. Children had their own games too: hide and seek, throwing stones or bits of wood like balls. Simple fun that brought laughter amid a harsh reality. Festivals and community gatherings were rare bright spots in frontier life. Independence Day celebrations, harvest festivals, or church socials were more than just chances to eat and have fun. They were vital opportunities to connect with neighbors who lived miles apart. The church stood as the heart of the community, where people shared news, offered support, and sought comfort. A strong sense of togetherness was a matter of survival. Folks in the West had a tradition of helping one another, building homes, raising barns, harvesting crops, or searching when a child went missing. But alongside this spirit of cooperation was a fierce belief in self-reliance. Every family wanted to stand on their own 2 feet, and relying too much on others could be seen as a sign of weakness. Family life on the frontier told a very different story from today's world, especially for children. Childhood wasn't a carefree time. It was a period of preparing for adult responsibilities. Kids as young as 6 or 7 were considered workers. They tended livestock, gathered eggs, picked vegetables, or looked after younger siblings. All important contributions to the family's survival. By the time they were 10 or 12, many worked alongside adults, plowing fields, chopping wood, or joining cattle drives. Education was limited and inconsistent. Schools, if there were any, only opened for a few months each year, usually in winter when farming slowed down. A single teacher taught multiple age groups in a chilly or stuffy one-room schoolhouse. Armed with a blackboard and a handful of worn books, corporal punishment like being struck with a ruler was common. In remote areas, schools might not exist at all, and children learned at home if their family had books. The result? Many kids could only read, write, and do basic math, focusing mainly on practical skills like reading the weather, tracking animals, or treating wounds. Child mortality was a heartbreaking reality. About 1 in 4 children didn't live to adulthood, with the first 5 years being the most dangerous. Diseases like measles, diphtheria, scarlet fever, or whooping cough could take lives or leave lasting disabilities. Accidents were common too. A child falling down a well, trampled by livestock, or hurt by tools. Child safety was an unknown concept. Parents, though grieving deeply, often grew used to loss. Many families named a newborn after a sibling who had died, holding on to hope through repetition. Death was simply part of life, and children grew up witnessing brothers and sisters pass away, learning to accept loss from a very young age. Imagine you're a 10-year-old child, lying on a straw mattress in a sod hut, listening to the wind howl and the distant cries of wild animals. Your hands are sore from hauling water all day, and you know tomorrow will bring more of the same. There are no days off, no video games, no summer vacations. Your family depends on you, and you grow up knowing that every day is a fight for survival. The adults love their children, but they don't have time to spoil them. The Wild West teaches you toughness from the moment you can walk, but it also leaves behind scars, deep ones that modern minds might struggle to understand. Life on the frontier was a delicate balance between hard work, small joys, and family ties. Every bit of laughter, every local festival, every act of neighborly kindness was a flicker of light in the darkness. But the grind of labor, the bite of loss, and the cold hands of time were constant reminders that the West was never kind. As you close your eyes trying to find rest in the freezing wind, you wonder if you have the strength to keep going, or if the West will take everything you have left. Now picture yourself standing on a dusty frontier road in the year 1875. This time you hear the distant whistle of a train. Its call carrying the breath of a new era. You've survived the harsh days of farming, the lonely nights by the fire, and the relentless challenges of an unforgiving land. But the West is changing. Sod huts are giving way to brick buildings. Wild trails are being replaced by railroads and laws. This is a turning point. A shift from a lawless frontier to a world of businesses, bureaucracy, and legends that will echo through history. Yet, change does not come easily. Dreams of freedom are often crushed beneath the wheels of progress. Get ready. We are entering the final chapter of the Wild West, where reality and myth intertwine, leaving behind a legacy as haunting as it is captivating. The Wild West you once knew, with its backbreaking days, violent mining towns, and dangerous cattle drives, is beginning to fade. By the late 1870s, a wave of transformation is sweeping across the land, and at the heart of it all is the railroad. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, wasn't just an engineering marvel, it was the spark that changed everything. It connected the West to national markets, turning remote wilderness into hubs of large-scale resource extraction. Gold, silver, timber, and cattle could now be shipped quickly to the east, while goods like clothing, tools, and canned food flowed in from the big cities. Suddenly, the West was no longer an isolated world. It had become part of a rapidly expanding global economy. But progress came with a price. Large corporations began to dominate the Western economy. Independent miners, once fueled by dreams of striking it rich, found themselves unable to compete with massive mining companies armed with advanced machinery and deep pockets. Small family farms, once the heart of the homestead dream, were gradually pushed aside by agricultural conglomerates owning thousands of acres. Corporate interests didn't just shape the economy, they steered politics as well. Water, minerals, and land, the West's most precious resources, were distributed not by fairness, but by wealth and influence. Ordinary farmers and miners, no matter how hard they worked, were often pushed to the margins, their dreams slowly crushed under the weight of corporate power. The culture of the West was shifting, too. Rough-and-tumble towns, once ruled by saloons and shootouts, began to take on a new look, one of order and civility. Banks, schools, churches, and newspapers sprang up, bringing with them a sense of structure. Dusty roads were paved and mapped, and sod huts gave way to sturdy brick homes. Local governments began to establish laws, replacing the chaos of the early frontier. Taming violence became a priority. Professional lawmen and formal court systems gradually replaced the vigilante justice that once defined lawless settlements. Street shootouts and mob hangings faded into history, replaced by trials and jails. In this period of transition, legendary figures of the Wild West were born. Icons who captured the spirit of the age. Names like Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt Earp, Billy the Kid, and Jesse James weren't just men. They were walking contradictions, straddling the line between law and lawlessness. They were sheriffs, outlaws, gunslingers, and bounty hunters, sometimes all at once. Their realities were complex and morally murky, far from the black-and-white heroes or villains Hollywood would later portray. Wild Bill Hickok, for instance, was a master marksman but also a man haunted by his own legend. Billy the Kid, often branded a ruthless bandit, was in many ways a product of a violent society that demanded harshness to survive. These figures didn't just live in their time. They became the seeds of enduring myth. By 1890, the U.S. Census Bureau officially declared the frontier closed. There were no longer vast stretches of unexplored, ungoverned land. This announcement was more than just a bureaucratic milestone. It marked a deep cultural and psychological shift. For those who had lived through the raw, untamed freedom of the frontier, the idea of a civilized West felt jarring. Many felt they had lost a piece of themselves, a sense of liberty that only the wild frontier could offer. And yet, it was in that very moment when the frontier disappeared, that the legend of the West was truly born. Why are we so captivated by the romanticized version of the Wild West? When the real frontier closed, stories of heroic cowboys, dramatic shootouts, and daring adventures on the open plains began to be told and retold, embellished by dime novels, newspapers, and later, by film. These tales didn't reflect reality, a world filled with backbreaking labor, disease, injustice, and death. Instead, they painted an idealized picture where rugged men, fearless women, and battles fought for honor reigned supreme. The myth became strongest just as the real West vanished, because people often yearn for what they've lost. Figures like Wyatt Earp and Jesse James were transformed into legends, even though their real lives were riddled with contradictions and pain. Imagine standing on the edge of a growing town, watching a steam train roll past, carrying goods and strangers from a faraway world. Around you, brick houses rise where sod huts once stood. A church bell rings, and somewhere nearby, a freshly printed newspaper recounts the daring exploits of a gunslinger turned folk hero. But deep in your heart, echoes of the wild days remain, the nights by the campfire, the perilous cattle drives, and the dreams of freedom now crushed beneath the wheels of progress. The Wild West was never just a place. It was an idea, a world where people confronted nature, one another, and their own limits. And when the frontier closed, the legend opened wide, keeping the West alive in our collective imagination. The Wild West, with all its harshness and beauty, left behind a complicated legacy. It is a story of grit and resilience, but also of loss. It speaks of grand dreams and brutal truths. And when you close your eyes and hear the wind whispering across once turbulent prairies, you might ask yourself, did I belong to that world, or is the Wild West just a dream we keep retelling? To hold on to a bit of freedom now long gone? Now picture yourself in a small theater somewhere in the eastern United States in the late 1800s. The dim glow of gaslight flickers across a curtain, revealing a brave cowboy squaring off against a gang of outlaws in a dramatic shootout. Applause erupts, the audience is spellbound. But you know the story is only a sliver of the truth. You lived through the gritty days of the Wild West in 1875. Dangerous mining towns, dry and unforgiving fields, and the transformation of a lawless land into a society ruled by corporate interests. But now, with the frontier closed, a new story is being told. Not by the farmers, cowboys, or native people, but by novelists, showmen, and eventually Hollywood. This is the final chapter of the Wild West, where legend replaces reality, where hard truths are hidden beneath a dream of freedom and heroism. Get ready, because we're about to explore why the Wild West continues to enchant us, even when what we know of it is often just a beautifully crafted tale. As the Wild West gradually transformed from lawless plains into orderly towns with railroads, banks, and churches, something curious happened. Just as the frontier disappeared, the legend of it began to take shape. Stories of the West, with brave cowboys, high-noon shootouts, and endless adventures, became a defining part of American identity. But these tales, as captivating as they are, often bear little resemblance to the reality you might have lived through. Days of backbreaking labor, racial injustice, and countless losses that went untold. One of the pioneers in crafting this myth was Buffalo Bill Cody. Through his Wild West show, Cody brought the West to audiences across America and even Europe. His performances reenacted battles with Native Americans, stagecoach robberies, and grand buffalo hunts. Spectators were thrilled by quick-draw cowboys, native performers in traditional dress, and breathtaking stunts. But don't be fooled, this wasn't history. It was entertainment. The battles were staged, the characters dramatized, and the complex reality of the West was simplified into a tale of good versus evil. Native people, often portrayed as savages, were in truth victims of expansion and genocide. Cowboys, presented as invincible heroes, were more often poor laborers, working grueling jobs for meager pay. Alongside Cody's shows came the rise of the dime novel, cheap paperbacks published in the East, often written by authors who had never set foot in the West. These stories were packed with dramatic action. Lone cowboys fighting outlaws, rescuing damsels in distress, or facing off against savage foes. The dime novels turned the West into a testing ground for idealized American virtues, self-reliance, courage, and justice. But what was the reality? The West was no stage for clear-cut morality. You saw the brutal injustices: Chinese workers driven from gold mines, Mexicans losing their lands, and native peoples forced into despair. The dime novels ignored these truths, replacing them with idealized heroes and simple villains to satisfy readers craving a neat and inspiring narrative. By the 20th century, Hollywood elevated the Western myth to new heights. Films starring icons like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood amplified the image of the lone cowboy, the noble sheriff, and the savage enemy. Showdowns at high noon, horseback chases through the desert, and dusty frontier towns became symbols of the West in the public imagination. But those images were far from reality. Gunfights were rare, and when they did happen they were chaotic and violent, not the stylized duels shown on screen. Native people, often cast as ruthless enemies, were in fact defending their land and culture against relentless invasion. And cowboys? They weren't lone white heroes, but often a diverse workforce, Black, Mexican, mixed race, facing discrimination and a hard, uncertain life. Western films don't just tell stories, they serve a deeper psychological and cultural purpose. They reinforce American identity, especially the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that Americans were destined to expand from the East Coast to the West, no matter the cost. These stories justify conquest, turning it into a heroic adventure. They simplify morality, dividing the world into good and evil, while ignoring the messy complexities of real life. You've seen the brutal hand of corporations, the exploitation of immigrant labor, and the destruction of native tribes. Yet Hollywood paints a West of moral victories, where justice always prevails. But behind the myth lies a painful truth: the genocide of native peoples, through disease, warfare, and policies like the destruction of buffalo herds, reduced their numbers from millions to just a few 100,000 by the end of the 19th century. Immigrants, especially Chinese laborers, were worked to exhaustion in dangerous jobs like railroad construction and mining, only to face discrimination and deportation. The environment suffered brutally. Forests were cleared, rivers poisoned with mercury from gold mines, and grasslands overgrazed. Powerful corporations manipulated politics to ensure that land, water, and minerals ended up in the hands of the wealthy, leaving small farmers and miners behind. The real West wasn't a simple tale of good and evil. It was a story of struggle, injustice, and the high price of ambition. Picture yourself sitting in a darkened theater, watching a Western film. A lone cowboy rides into the sunset after vanquishing his enemies. Triumphant music swells. The audience applauds. But inside, your memories of the real West linger. The backbreaking days in the mines, the cold nights in a grass hut, the nameless graves lining the Oregon Trail, and the native peoples who lost everything. The legend of the West, for all its beauty, is a comforting illusion, a story crafted to soothe, to soften truths too painful to face. It offers a dream of freedom and justice, but it hides the scars of an era that shaped America in ways we're still struggling to understand. As you close your eyes and imagine the fading hoofbeats on the prairie, you wonder, why do we love these stories so much? Maybe it's because they give us a glimpse of the Wild West, Not the real West, with its blood, sweat, and sorrow, but a West of dreams, where anyone can be a hero. And every tale ends well. But the real West, with all its complexity and cruelty, remains, waiting for us to discover. Not on the silver screen, but through the true stories of those who lived, loved, and lost in this unforgiving land. Imagine yourself sitting by a crackling campfire, the flickering light dancing across your face, while the vast night sky of the American West in 1875 stretches endlessly above. You've lived through the harshest of days, dangerous cattle drives, leaky sod huts, violent mining towns, and the deep injustices of a land as diverse as it is unforgiving. You've witnessed the West transform from a lawless frontier into a society ruled by railroads and powerful corporations, where myths were carefully crafted to mask painful truths. But now, with the fire quietly popping and the stars keeping watch, it's time to reflect, to look back on the trials that shaped the West, to understand why modern people might struggle to survive in such a world, and to uncover the legacy it left behind. This isn't just a story of the past. It's a quiet reminder of resilience, tragedy, and the timeless questions the Wild West still asks of us today. So get ready. This final chapter will take you on a journey of deep reflection, where the light of history illuminates both what came before and what still lingers within us. The Wild West was no place for the faint of heart. Each day was a brutal test of your body, your mind, and your will. Picture this. You wake up in a damp sod house, rain dripping through the roof, your breath turning to mist in the freezing air. There's no heating system, no hot water, and breakfast is a rock-hard biscuit and a bitter cup of coffee. The day's work demands sheer grit. Breaking ground choked with roots tough as iron, plowing under a blistering sun, or driving thousands of cattle across raging rivers. A single misstep, a panicked horse, an infected cut, or a sudden stampede could end your life in an instant. Disease was a constant threat. Cholera could take you in hours. Scurvy made your gums bleed. Childbirth complications often ended in heartbreak. There were no hospitals, no antibiotics, just whiskey and luck. Modern folks, used to clean water, fresh produce, and modern medicine, would find this life nearly impossible. Think about it. Could you dig and sow for hours with a crude hoe? Could you survive a winter at -20 degrees Fahrenheit in a leaky cabin? Could you endure the crushing isolation, with your nearest neighbor miles away, and months slipping by without a soul to talk to beyond your own kin? Life on the frontier demanded astonishing physical endurance, a wide range of practical skills, from tracking game to reading the sky to treating wounds, and a mental toughness we rarely see today. Prairie madness, a very real affliction of depression and anxiety brought on by isolation and relentless hardship, broke many spirits. This lifestyle is alien to us, creatures of alarm clocks, structured schedules, and the comforts of a modern world. So why does the Wild West still captivate us? Perhaps it's because of its raw honesty. Life out there was stripped down to its bare essentials: survival, community, and meaning. Every task had a clear, tangible result. A field planted with crops, a herd driven safely to its destination, or a house raised from nothing but determination and wood. There was also something deeply human in the way communities relied on one another. Self-reliance was celebrated, yes, but survival often depended on cooperation. Neighbors came together to build barns, harvest crops, or search for a lost child. These small, quiet moments of shared effort offered a sense of connection that modern life so often lacks. And perhaps most of all, the West reminds us that people can endure, and even find purpose, in the harshest of circumstances. In a world filled with comforts, we long for stories of resilience, of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and refusing to break. The legacy of the West goes far beyond the myths of cowboys and gunfights. It shaped how America manages land, water, and natural resources. Laws made in those early days still ripple through the country today. Tensions between federal and state power, between individual rights and collective good, all have roots in the Western frontier. The West was never a monolith. It was a tapestry woven from many threads. Chinese immigrants, Mexicans, Black homesteaders, and native peoples all left their mark on its culture, identity, and traditions. But this legacy also carries unresolved questions. How do we balance personal freedom with social responsibility? How do we reconcile past injustices with the demands of the present? And then, there's the Native perspective, a view that cannot be ignored. For Indigenous peoples, the Wild West was not a romantic chapter, but a time of deep loss. As settlers expanded, they dismantled ancient ways of life, from buffalo hunting to intricate agricultural systems. The Native population fell from millions to under 300,000 by 1900, decimated by disease, war, and cultural erasure through forced relocations and boarding schools. Their struggle to preserve identity and culture continues even now. To understand the West truthfully, we must look from all angles, not just through the eyes of the settlers, but also through those who lost everything in the name of expansion. Though centuries apart, invisible threads still bind us to the Wild West. Imagine standing beneath a star-filled sky, untouched by city lights. You hear the distant howl of a wolf and feel the deep stillness of the open plains. These sounds, this darkness, this beauty, they are the same as what people experienced long ago. Across time, we still share the same awe at nature's majesty, the same fear of the unknown, and the same hope for a better tomorrow. The Wild West, for all its harshness, reminds us that human beings can adapt to anything, if they have the will and a community to stand with them. Fast forward to the present. To truly understand the West, we must look beyond the surface of old-time novels and Hollywood films. The gunfights and gold rushes are only fragments of the story. The real story is about ordinary people, men, women, and children struggling every day with limited means. They built homes from sod, planted seeds in dry soil, and created communities in the middle of nowhere. It's a story woven with courage, tragedy, ingenuity, conflict, cooperation, cruelty, and kindness, all entangled in one complex tapestry. Today we may enjoy comfort and security, but we've also lost something: the self-reliance, the ability to read the weather, the survival skills Western settlers depended on every single day. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the Wild West isn't in the answers it gives, but in the questions it leaves behind. How do people adapt to the harshest environments? How do we build community among profound differences? And what should the relationship between people and nature truly look like? These aren't questions of the past. They echo in the choices we make now, in how we live, manage our resources, and treat one another. Each generation must answer them anew, drawing both wisdom and warning from those who came before. Picture yourself lying on a straw mattress. The fire has burned low, leaving only darkness and the wind whispering through the grass. You think about those who came before: farmers, cowboys, native peoples, and immigrants, each carrying their own dreams. The Wild West was never a tale of easy victories or flawless heroes. It was a daily struggle. It was the story of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges, and of a landscape that helped shape the soul of a nation. As you close your eyes, you feel the weight of history, not as something distant but as something within you. Quiet reminder that, no matter how much the world changes, the spirit of the West endures, in the timeless questions of survival, of community, and of what it truly means to be human. Imagine lying beneath the night sky of the Wild West in the year 1875. The stars shimmer like scattered gems across an endless black velvet. The wind whistles through the prairie grass, mingling with the distant howl of wolves, carrying the breath of a land both harsh and magnificent. You've lived through long, trying days, treacherous trails, violent towns, and the deep injustices of a chaotic era. You've witnessed the West transform, from a lawless frontier to a society shaped by railroads and corporations, where legends often hide painful truths. But now, in this moment of stillness, you feel a deep connection to the past, to those who struggled, loved, and lost on this very land. Under the radiant sky, you sense the fragility and resilience of the human spirit. The West was a place where cultures collided: settlers, native peoples, immigrants from every corner of the world, sometimes clashing, sometimes coming together to build something greater. Each day was a battle to survive, but also a chance for something transcendent. A dance around a fire, a home raised from nothing, a glance of shared understanding between strangers. The vast landscapes, the endless grasslands, the towering mountains, stood witness to their resilience and their tragedy. And now they witness you. As sleep begins to settle in, you dream of the Wild West, not the one of gunfights and glittering gold mines, but the one filled with ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. It's a story of courage, of loss, and of the invisible threads that tie people to one another and to the land. Beneath the stars, you feel yourself become part of history, a piece of the land that helped shape a nation. If you found this story meaningful, feel free to leave a comment, share your thoughts on what the real Wild West means to you, or subscribe to the channel to explore more captivating stories from the past. We've come to the end of this journey into the Wild West. Sleep well, and may your dreams be peaceful.